degrees. A windy start then across Scotland. Those winds could cause some disruption. Blustery conditions bringing plenty of showers in here. Early rain across the southeast, taking its time before it completely clears away from Kent and Sussex. And then again, many places seeing sunny spells, but there will be a few showers zipping through on the winds. And it will be a windy day, a blustery day. 10 or 11 degrees across the north, but maybe in the sunshine in the afternoon over the Midlands and eastern England, 15 or 16 Celsius. It will feel colder than that because of the wind. And then we see another band of showery rain zipping across the country on those strong and gusty winds as we go through Wednesday night and into Thursday. And then Thursday likely to be a mixture of sunshine and showers with some heavy ones likely on the south coast. And we'll see further wet weather at times for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. Sunny spells, say, elsewhere between those downpours. But the showers will again be on the heavy side. But again, they'll zip through because of the strength of the gusty winds. Still pretty mild. Temperatures across the north, double figures. Further south, getting into the teens. That's all from me for now. Goodbye.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Condemned public's loss of faith in the police. Rotten mess. Met has lost public faith. Racist, misogynistic, homophobic. The damning verdict on Met Police. It is racist, sexist and broken. That are the headlines today. Those are the headlines today. Questions number 1. Are you a serving or former police officer? How do you feel when you hear those headlines? Are they fair and just, or completely unfounded and different to your experience? Are you a user of the police? Do you sit there and say, yes, these findings are long overdue? What do we do about it all? Is it time for fundamental reform of the police? And if so, what would that look like? And cast your mind back, if you will, a couple of years. Do you remember the awful, cruel policies where people were in care homes, some of them in their dying days, denied a single solitary visitor, forced to touch hands with their loved ones through a glass window? I speak, of course, of the COVID pandemic. Some care homes still restricting visitors to this day. Inhumane, if you ask me. And now there are calls for a law to be created to make sure it would never happen again in spite of any circumstances. Do you agree with that or not? And Baroness Claire Fox, she has been no platformed. She was supposed to be speaking at a university and is now not. Why? Because she had the audacity, ladies and gentlemen, get this trigger warning. She retweeted a joke about a trans person. Goodness gracious me. What is wrong with the next generation? Why are they so offended by opinions that they do not like? Free speech on one hand, but what about the freedom to choose who you do and don't listen to on the other? And lastly, if you're sitting at home, you can smell something strange. It'll be these, my feet. Hang on, I'm going to try and get them both on. If I lose my footing, forgive me. Down syndrome awareness. Day to day, odd socks to celebrate you guys in all of your differences. You're different, but the same, and we salute you. Anyway, we'll have all of that to come and more. I'm going to put some DP on my back. Polly Middlehurst is going to bring us the latest news headlines while I do.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News today, well, as you've been hearing, a damning report into Britain's largest police force has been described by the Home Secretary as very concerning. Baroness Louise Casey, who led the review, found the Met Police to be institutionally racist, misogynist and homophobic. She said victims have been let down and officers who've abused their power have shattered public trust. The report also found the Met's current ethics standards and disciplinary procedures have failed abysmally, and she's calling for a complete overhaul of the service. Suella Braverman says she has every faith that Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley will be a catalyst for change and has vowed to hold officers and the Mayor of London to account.
There have been growing concerns around the performance of the Metropolitan Police and its ability to command the confidence and trust of Londoners. This follows a series of abhorrent cases of officers who betrayed the public's trust and hideously abused their powers. Today's report, commissioned by Sir Mark's predecessor, makes for very concerning reading. It's clear that there have been serious failures of culture, leadership and standards.
Well, in responding, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said while the report was about the Met Police, it affects every force in the country.
There will be police forces outside of London who might shrug their shoulders and say, this isn't us. But I've worked in criminal justice for decades, and I say to them, wake up. The findings in the Casey report are a warning for every police force. Confidence must be restored. Policing by consent depends on trust. And when that breaks down, policing becomes harder and crime thrives.
Well, the Deputy Leader of Lambeth Council in London and Director of the charity Black Thrive, Dr Jackie Dyer, says discrimination is rampant.
The mistrust is in every atom of every black body in this city. We are traumatised by the harm that is being conducted rampantly and relentlessly by policing, which is so unaccountable. It's like the wild, wild west out there. You can do anything you like and it's okay. Well, it's not okay.
Boris Johnson has accepted he misled Parliament over Partygate, but he maintains it wasn't intentional or reckless. Submitting his 52-page defence dossier to the Privileges Committee today, the former Prime Minister admitted gatherings at Downing Street during lockdown should never have happened. He also says statements in the House of Commons were made in good faith. He's due to give more evidence in person before MPs tomorrow. Counter-terrorism police are investigating an attack outside a mosque in Birmingham, and a warning: we're about to show video of the moment a man was set alight, which some viewers may find distressing. CCTV footage shows the victim, who was walking home, being approached yesterday before he was sprayed with an unknown substance. West Midlands Police says he suffered serious injuries, including burns to his face, but they're not thought to be life-threatening. A man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. And a man's been charged for sending an inappropriate message to Labour's deputy leader. Angela Rayner received an email said to have been grossly offensive and indecent. In May last year, 66-year-old David Perry has been charged under the Communications Act. He'll appear before Westminster Magistrates Court next month. Now, a group of Eurosceptic Conservative MPs have described parts of the Prime Minister's new Brexit deal with the EU as practically useless. The European Research Group commissioned lawyers to scrutinise the Windsor framework ahead of tomorrow's vote on the Stormont break element of the proposal. A spokesperson for Rishi Sunak said it is a good deal and is urging lawmakers to back it. But the Eurogroup's chair, Marc Francois, says issues still need to be addressed.
EU law will still be supreme in Northern Ireland. The rights of its people under the 1800 Act of Union are not restored. The Green Lane is not really a green lane at all. The Stormont break is practically useless, and the framework itself has no exit other than through a highly complex legal process.
You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Back now to Michelle. I'll see you in an hour.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Toby Young, who's the director of Free Speech Union, and James Schneider, the co-founder of Momentum and a former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn. Good evening to both of you guys. Lots of people getting in touch already. There's a little bit of confusion by people that have just tuned in. Sue's just said, Michelle, what on earth are you wearing under that desk? Is that usual? I always assumed that you was well turned out from top to toe. I am well turned out, Sue. I was just showing my odd socks, and the reason I was getting them up on the desk was just to show them off because I am marking, well, Down Syndrome Day today, and there's a campaign about odd socks. That's what I was doing. Lots of gentlemen writing in about my feet. Calm yourself down. They are just feet. We all have them. John has been in touch saying, please, 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 before you start the show, can you pass a message on to Toby from me? Can you ask him to sit on his hands whilst he's talking? John worries that he says, is he trying to hypnotise us when he speaks because he talks with his hands?
It's true. I can't help it. If
Do
I
you?
sit on my hands, I mumble and stumble and stammer.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, you don't want mumbling and stumbling and stammering, do you? So there you go. You'll have to just put up with a mild hypnosis, if you don't mind. Lots of you getting in touch as well about the stories tonight. Met Police, the police in general, that's what I'll be coming on to in just a second. Lots of you, former police officers, it seems, lots of you getting in touch about the report that I've just been showing you. It's front page of the newspapers today, the so-called Casey report. Sylvia and Bill have been in touch saying, for goodness sake, Michelle, can you shut up talking about COVID? You are like a dog with a bone. They are referring to one of the topics I'll be coming on to tonight, asking you whether or not you think there should be a law that would mean that never again would anyone in a care home be subject to those inhumane, cruel practices of denying them a single solitary visitor. So no, I can't shut up about it, unfortunately, because I think it's such an important topic that has the potential to affect us all and our loved ones. ones. Get in touch tonight, join the conversation, gbviews@gbnews.uk, email me, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get into that top story about the police then, shall we? A report has found, and I quote, institutional racism, misogyny and homophobia within the Metropolitan Police. You may recall this was the Casey report that was set up after the horrific murder of Sarah Everard. Well, it's now concluded. We have the findings. It's dividing you guys at home, I can tell you now. One of the comments that I've got from one of my viewers is saying, we hear these words all the time. Everything's racist, misogynistic, homophobic. One of my viewers is saying that those words are losing their impact. Ponder that at home if you will. Toby, your thoughts today, because these are pretty damning headlines and conclusions, right?
Yeah. My impression is that the Casey report is misdiagnosing the problem.
Right.
The problem is that the public are losing confidence in the police. And the reason for that is not because there is this perception amongst the general public at large that the police are racist, misogynistic and homophobic. The problem is that the police just aren't doing their job of protecting us from criminals, or at least not doing it well enough. I looked at the rate at which burglaries are solved. So 5% across England and Wales, 5% of burglaries were solved last year, down from 9.4% in 2015. And in London, it's even worse. Only 3.8% of burglaries solved in London. Why are the police not doing a better job of solving crimes like burglaries? I think in part it's because they're too busy policing our tweets and not policing our streets. Why? Because they're just deluged with all this diversity training. They're taught that they need to protect the feelings of these disadvantaged identity groups, groups like Stonewall, Gendered Intelligence, Mermaids, bombarding them with this highly partisan, politicised training. And they think that their job is to go out and record instances of politically incorrect speech and behaviour on Twitter and Facebook. And if you call up and you say, I've been burgled, or my car's been broken into, or my child just got mugged at knife point, you'll best get a crime reference number. That's the issue. That's the problem. And this is just a distraction, I think, from the real issue.
Lots that I could come back on that, but before I do, James, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's clear that there's a loss of trust with the police for a lot of reasons, some of which Toby said. There's crime rates have been going up, but also there are specific communities that have lost trust with the police and the Metropolitan Police because of racism, the disproportionate stop and search of black people. We've had the Macpherson report was over 20 years ago, found that the Met was institutionally racist, and Casey's had this big report and has found the same thing again. So, but I think we should, rather than arguing over who is lobbying the police more and this idea that they're spending too much time on tweets or whatever, we should take this as an opportunity that if the Met is going to be fundamentally overhauled in a similar way to the Royal Ulster Constabulary was overhauled to become the Northern Ireland Police Force, then we have a chance to remake policing in a way that would actually serve the needs of people in London and that would restore trust. So then you start looking at things that people want, which is community policing. They want to have some kind of community oversight of the policing that is done, and also the integrating of not just seeing police as and crime as totally separate from other social issues, it being integrated into expanding youth centre provision, mental health support, looking at colleges for kids. I think we should take this as an opportunity. Let's start from scratch. If we were starting from scratch, how would we construct a system that served everybody in London far better? And I think let's start doing that now.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that point, I wowould say actually some of these problems are not just specific to the Met. I mean, there's other police forces in the UK that are on, for example, special measures. So I'm very keen that I don't just make this a specific London issue. Get in touch with me about your local police force as well and tell me your thoughts. Do you see this then as an opportunity to basically rip it all up and start again?
Well, no, I see it as an opportunity to get the police to focus on their core mission, which should be protecting the public from crime. I don't think that making the police responsible for, providing youth services to young people, to engaging in social work. I mean, if they can't get the basics right, if they can't...
I'm not suggesting the police should do... I'm not suggesting the police should do social work, but if we're looking at policing and you have cut youth centres. I'm not saying the police should be running youth centres, but you can't look at these things in isolation. If you have cut youth centres, if you have cut mental health support, that's likely to be driving more crime. So we have an opportunity, I think, to take a step back and look a bit more holistically and see what are the drivers of crime, where are we seeing crime, where are we not seeing policing in the streets, and where are you seeing a big disconnect? Because there are communities that see a really big disconnect between them and the police. And you can't have policing by consent if people don't trust the police. So there's a problem of under-policing, which you spoke about. There's a problem of over-policing as well. And I think this is a great opportunity to just take a step back and say, if we were starting from scratch, what would we do? And then try to put those things forward.
But I think one of the reasons the public are losing confidence in the police is because more and more frequently, the police are turning up outside people's homes, sometimes in force, threatening people with arrest for doing things like misgendering a trans person on Twitter or using politically incorrect language. They're policing thought crimes rather than actual crimes. I mean, maybe not at the scale that people imagine, but we've done some...
Yeah, how much of that actually happened?
Well, we looked into this at the Free Speech Union, and we think something like 250,000 plus non-crime hate incidents have been recorded since 2014 in England and Wales alone. That's an average of about 65 a day. If the police are spending so much time investigating, recording non-crime hate incidents, which are by definition not crimes, usually some instance of politically incorrect behaviour that some community group or local activist has complained about,
what percentage?
That's what they're spending their time on.
What percentage is that of the total number of cases they're dealing with? I'm just trying...
Well, it's a quarter of a million. It's far too many. I think you'd agree.
Well, it depends. I don't know. What's the total amount?
One of the reasons the police are spending so much time on policing people's thoughts is because of the training they receive. The Free Speech Union carried out some research a couple of weeks ago. We just published the report this week. It was written about in the Times yesterday. We asked all 41 police services in England and Wales, what training are you given to your police forces about the legal protections in place for free speech? And the answer was 78% of those who responded said they were either providing no training at all or an absolutely negligible amount. One line on Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Diversity training, by contrast, they were receiving in voluminous amounts, and that's why they're getting their priorities wrong when it comes to protecting free speech or protecting people's hurt feelings. And if they spent a little less time on that and a little more time on solving things like burglaries, knife crime, auto theft, I think the public confidence would soar.
I think part of the reason why burglaries, auto theft, etc., aren't being dealt with so much is we've had 13 years of cuts to police forces, the numbers are lower, the budgets are lower. I think that's almost certainly a much larger cause of allocation of resources than some non-hate cases you're saying, or you think that the training they're getting is misordered. I think that's clearly the thing that we should be looking at, is its funding. And then you're talking about knife crime. That then goes back to the point that we also have to look at the broader things of cuts to youth services, mental health, the broader set of things which create reasonable communities that people want to live in and feel safe. And safety isn't only about crime that could be committed to you. There's a perception of it, and there's a sense of community. And I think those things are where we should be starting. That's what we should be looking at when we're reimagining what we should do with the Met, how we should overhaul this institution, which has been so hugely criticised and people have lost trust with, rather than the questions of what training they get on diversity. Although that might, there might be questions there, I don't know, but I would think that they're probably more marginal than the other things.
This whole youth centre, because I do hear this a lot about, we've closed down, let's blame the Tories for closing down youth centres and that causes crime. They don't really wash with me, because I think it's a very lame excuse if a teenager says, do you know what, I've just gone and stabbed that kid or I just mugged that granny because I couldn't go and play pinball and have a bag of crisps at my local youth centre. I think that's an excuse for poor behaviour.
No, it's not because I don't think if someone goes and attacks a granny or stabs someone, they should be able to say, well, not my fault because the youth centre was closed. Of course not. But if we're looking at what drives crime, what is more likely to create criminal behaviours, then clearly the the conditions that you're in, the quality of the school, the services that you have in your community have big impacts on crime outcomes. So if what we're interested in is how can we have the lowest levels of crime in our communities, we should be looking quite seriously at the things which are driving crime. That doesn't say that because we're looking at these things, if someone stabs someone, it's not their fault. Of course it is. They stabbed someone, but there are things which could make that less likely to have happened.
Yeah, I think there's so much going on these days. When I was a teenager, I just don't remember groups of people wandering around with zombie knives in their pants. And I blame, for example, things like social media. So and I think you would be opposed to this, I would look at banning things like TikTok, because I think you're glamorising, and a lot of kind of drill music does the same. I think you're glamorising this gangster thug life, like look at me with my vast array of zombie knives. And then people want to emulate it because it's almost made to be cool or something.
Well, I don't completely disagree with you. I think there is a case for limiting children's access to social media. Maybe they should have to be at least 14 before they can download TikTok, and then only in limited amounts. I mean, it's ironic, isn't it, that in China, which has invented TikTok, Chinese teenagers are only allowed to spend at most 1 hour a day on the social media app, which tells you something about what the Chinese government think about the harmful impact of social media apps like TikTok. But I really do think that this is a missed opportunity. There may well be, societal reasons as to why crime is increasing, but this is a report about the police and what the police are getting wrong. And it seems to me that what they're getting wrong is they're not focusing, they're not pouring enough resources and effort into actually solving the crimes that are making people in this city's lives.
Well, I mean, a lot of the mistakes that are in the report are things like not holding on to evidence in rape cases. They are
they put the lunch boxes in the fridge and contaminated them.
Right. That's not because someone's been on one too many diversity away days or been taught how to carry their cup of tea properly or whatever it might be. Likewise, the racist policing, disproportionate stop and search, and so on. That's again not because someone has been on too many away days to.
Well, but it might well be that if they received a bit more training about how not to contaminate DNA evidence and a bit less on how to be an anti-racist or a good ally to LGBTQ+ people, they might not have made that.
So you think if people were spending less time having, for example, anti-racism training, they would somehow be less likely to do racist policing? I don't quite follow the logic.
No, the logic is if they spent more time on training about getting the basics of forensic policing right and not contaminating things like DNA samples, if they spent more time on that and less time on EDI, then they might make fewer mistakes like this.
Is it a case that people have lost trust in the police, or is it that you've lost faith in their ability to deliver outcomes? Are they one of the same thing, or are they different things to you? Thomas, you have just taken some words off the top of my head that I was about to speak. You've written in, and he says that the guy in the green shirt is talking a lot of sense. He's talking about you. And then he goes on to say, he says, one of the things that he sees an issue with at the moment, this is the point I was just about to make, is that degrees have become almost an essential requirement now when you're hiring police officers. And I worry about this, and I worry about it in nursing as well, but let's not divert off the topic, that you've got this kind of obsession now where, if you want to be a police officer, you've got to have a degree or you've got to work towards a degree. Why? Why?
Well, I actually agree with you. I think the idea that everyone has to have particular types of credentials to do jobs is because we've had a boom in higher education, and it isn't in lots of jobs that isn't necessary. It's actually different types of training that are specific to those professions, which would be more useful.
I want to hear your thoughts today. Do you trust the police? Do you have an outcome mindset when you call the police? Do you think to yourself, yes, defos, these guys are going to fix my issue, they're going to catch this criminal? Or do you just sit there and think, actually, I can't be bothered to report it because they won't do anything? And are you a serving police officer? What is your morale like? I read some of the front pages of the newspapers today, and they're awful. And this is not the first time that you've come in for a kicking, and day after day after day, you're braver than me, I'll give you your due. You put your uniforms on, you charge into danger. More often than not, you don't even probably know what's the end of that piece of danger you've just been called to. You risk your lives. Your family probably don't rest until you get home safely on the night. And you must look at that and think that is the thanks that I get. Does it make you wish that you'd chosen a different profession? Does it make you want to leave your profession? D says, Michelle, today I walked up to a police officer in the city and I thanked them for their service. We need to make sure that our bobbies on the beat have high morales and want to keep coming to work. Give me all your thoughts, please. GBviews at gbnews.uk. When I come back, I'll be sharing some of the opinions of you guys at home. And I also want to ask you, cast your mind back. You don't even need to cast it that far back, actually, because it's still going on to this day. But anyway, there's awful images of people, often at end of life, having to see their loved ones through panes of glass, touching hands through glass, often being forced to die alone in care homes. Should there be a new law which means that never again, who cares the circumstances, never again would anyone be left alone to die alone in care homes? Would you like to see that law, or is that completely implausible? Your thoughts, please, and I'll see you in 2.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs & Co. We're with you till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, Toby Young, the director of Free Speech Union, and James Schneider, the co-founder of Momentum. Lots of you getting in touch. Jamie, I'm a serving police officer and I'm not surprised by this report. There are a lot of bullies in the police who tend to be high-ranking, but they get away with it because people are too scared to report it, or because they have too much power. It's not an organisation I want to be a part of. Alan says, I worked for the force for 12 years and there were good and bad officers there, just as there are good and bad people in life. Another James has said, I used to serve in the Met and I never witnessed anything that reflects this report. You say the report feels to you like a hatchet job and deeply unfair. Phil says, I was a detective in the Met Police for 30 years and I can honestly say that most people are hardworking and decent people. Phil says, in his mind, it's an opportunity for people who have an axe to grind against the police to use this to slaughter the organisation. He says all of this is soul-destroying for any Met Police officers who are working there at present. There you go. Keep your thoughts coming in. But let's move on, shall we? Can we all remember the situation in the pandemic? It still goes on, I would argue, to this day. But long story short, I'm talking about the people in care homes and hospitals that were stopped from having contact with their loved ones during the period of the pandemic. Well, there's calls now under the guise of Gloria's Law, they're calling it, where residents and patients would have the right to always have at least one care supporter who could visit them in all circumstances, come what may. I think this is a great idea. I never want to see, I think it was very barbaric and cruel and inhumane, the policies that were enforced on these people in lockdown, and I would argue still continue to this day. I would support a law. Would you, James?
I'm sympathetic to the sentiment of the people pushing for it, but I wouldn't support it as law. I think it would be bad law because you can't know what the medical conditions are going to be. So let's say we had something like Ebola, where touch is extremely, it's extremely contagious, and then that person can give it to other people. I can see circumstances when, even though it's absolutely horrific, for perfectly reasonable medical reasons, you can't. So while I'm very sympathetic to it, and I think people not being able to see their loved ones, to say goodbye or to have somebody with them when they go is really, it's really horrific. But I think making a law which ties the hands, which basically says that there's no hypothetical medical example in the future which we can't predict, I think that's basically bad law.
Toby?
I think if we have an Ebola pandemic, protecting people in care homes from getting Ebola will be the least of our problems. No, I'm wholeheartedly behind this law. I think it's a great idea. It was absolutely inhumane to stop people visiting their loved ones, particularly when they were ill or dying in care homes during the pandemic. There's no evidence that actually protected people from getting COVID-19 in care homes. After all, the staff were walking in and out of care homes. If anyone was bringing it in, they were bringing it in. And I think there's another reason why this is a really important measure too, which is I'm absolutely convinced, and there's quite a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest this is true, that one of the reasons for the high number of deaths in care homes during the pandemic, it wasn't just because older people were more vulnerable to COVID-19. It was because of neglect in care homes of older people. Many older people died of starvation and thirst or of untreated other diseases. Why? Because their loved ones weren't coming in to check on them regularly and make sure they weren't being neglected. So for all sorts of really good reasons, I think this is a really sensible law.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I would want to see it in cast iron law is because, as we're seeing now with all of the so-called lockdown files and all the rest of it, so many of these rules and policies and all the rest of it, they were based on, in some cases, not a lot really. They were based on, I don't want to have an argument with Nicola Sturgeon, so yeah, let's mask all these kids. And so much of the so-called follow the science wasn't science at all. It was ridiculous. It was a science of ridiculousness, if anything. So I would say, if you protected people, you had this law, when you're then considering your options and your manoeuvres, if ever anything happened like this again, you would be mindful of, right, well, we have these things in law, therefore we have to follow them and all the rest of it. And I would say, what right as a care home or a nurse or anyone got to say, right, this person, you can't see your loved one? To me, that is complete overreach, state overreach.
Well, so I think it depends on how infectious and how the thing is infectious. And of course, we found out more over the course of the pandemic. We thought it transferred from touch and it was more contagious than it was at the beginning. And then we found out it's airborne and so on. But I can see the circumstance in which you'd say, these people are too vulnerable, no one from the outside can come in, because it's not just a risk to the loved one that I'm visiting, it might be to other people's loved ones who are there. So while as I say, I'm extremely sympathetic to the sentiment behind it. I understand why you both support it, but I think it sounds like a recipe for bad law. I think it's good to say we should err on the side of of stopping loneliness, of preventing people from being completely isolated in these, if we have these terrible times again. But to put it in a cast iron law, which then can't be responsive to what the situation is at the time, I think is the wrong response to that.
One of my viewers, Paul, you just give me an internal smile because he says, Michelle, I'm in my 80s and I currently live at home. If I ever have to go into a care home, then I want legislation to stop people visiting me so that I can be on my own. I have to say, you did make me smile there, Paul. Another Peter has said, Michelle, and he puts it in capitals, so I know you mean business. You say, please, will you move on? You're like a stuck record. Don't you guys mind, or the ones that this is relevant to, don't you guys mind what happened during the pandemic when you see videos of people, for example, at funerals that weren't allowed to comfort their loved ones, when you see people saying goodbye to their loved ones on an iPhone screen, etc. Don't you mind, now that you've heard that actually so much of this was based on absolute nonsense? Don't you sit there and think to yourself, we should never, ever, ever, ever again be in that predicament? It blows my mind that so many people don't seem to mind about this, but get in touch with me. Give me your thoughts. Would you support a law like this? Or are you more of the camp which says, pack it in, Michelle, shut up, move on? It's currently dividing you. I want a petition to stop anyone treating people in care homes as they did during the lockdown. Inhumane does not go far enough to describe this atrocity, says Pat. John says, I wouldn't support a law because, as James says, we don't know what we would be dealing with when it comes to another pandemic. Well, keep your thoughts coming in. GBViews at gbnews.uk is how you can reach me tonight. Coming up after the break, I'll have a lot more of your thoughts. You're still getting in touch about that policing one as well. But I want to talk to you about Baroness Claire Fox. She's been on this show. You might remember her. Anyway, she was supposed to be speaking at a university and now they've stopped her. Right, you've got to... I'll issue a trigger warning, and then when I come back from the break, I'll tell you what she did, which made her get cancelled from speech. So if you're easily offended, just have a lay down, and I'll see you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Toby Young is the director of Free Speech Union, and James Schneider, co-founder of Momentum and a former advisor to Corbyn. How have you been getting on sitting on your hands, by the way?
I don't think I've been succeeding.
Have you not been succeeding? I did tell him, everybody, lots of you guys getting in touch. Alison says, I am a female and I was a Met officer for 16 years. The report, the Casey report that we was discussing at the start of the show, she says it's taking isolated incidents and making them the norm. It is not a true reflection of the force as a whole. So Alison there thinks it's quite unfair. Mark echoes what we just discussed earlier on, saying making nursing and policing academic is wrong. The forces are recruiting the wrong types of people and training them the wrong way. Do you think that's fair? Val says, Michelle, please can your tech staff do something with the studio lighting, because you've got shadows down your face and lines down your glasses. Valerie, I've got to be honest, the shadow's probably an age thing, and the lines are probably just because I haven't wiped my glasses. So as much as I'd like to blame it on someone else, I don't think I can. Sorry about that. Right. Claire Fox, Baroness Claire Fox, to give her correct title. She was supposed to be speaking at a university debating society, but she's been asked not to, because I did issue a trigger warning. So you ready, everyone? Get this. This is what she did. I just need to brace myself. She retweeted a joke. She did. It was a transgender joke, apparently. Anyway, because of that, there was lots of people that complained, and meant that because of her so-called transphobic views, they didn't want to hear from Claire anymore. So her speech was no longer. Now, this starts another debate, doesn't it, about free speech versus consequences and choice to choose who you want to hear from. Where do you come at this, Toby?
Well, I know a bit about this case because it's a free speech case. So
Right.
Baroness Fox reached out to us for help, and we've been looking into what happened.
Right.
And she was due to give a speech at the Royal Holloway Debating Society. The student union got wind of this, and they said it was a breach of their no platform for hate speech policy because she had retweeted a joke by Ricky Gervais. And the student union then browbeat, bullied, put the debating society under enormous pressure, said it would be protested, the security costs would be astronomical, and eventually they just decided they had no choice but to cancel it. And the irony is that the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill, which will make it slightly harder to no platform speakers at universities in England, is currently being debated today in the House of Lords. And often the response of various Lib Dem and Labour peers, even some Conservative peers, is that there is no free speech crisis in Britain's universities. It's a figment of the imagination of right-wing culture warriors and Daily Telegraph columnists. And yet Claire Fox was able to stand up in the House of Lords today and say, hang on a second, it's not a figment of anyone's imagination. It happened to me 2 weeks ago at Royal Holloway, and for completely ridiculous, spurious reasons. So the timing of the case is good from that point of view, but it's absolutely absurd that this kind of thing is still happening all the time.
Yeah, and be clear, everyone at home, this is not an isolated incident about Claire Fox by any stretch, but that is the most recent example of it, so hence I'm using that to pin this too. I've got to say, James, when I hear this, or so-and-so said this thing and she's transphobic and don't let her come to university, I just roll my eyes and I just think, oh, you're a bit pathetic, really. What do you think?
So if I had been in the debating society or whatever, I wouldn't have disinvited her. It's a bad joke, but you know, that's not a reason for me, I think, to disinvite. But the idea that there's this terrible assault on free speech and that her free speech has been offended and that everyone has a right to speak on whatever platform they want at any point is also, frankly, rather silly. I mean, she's going to have more profile to speak about what she wants because she has a position in the House of Lords. Anything she says goes straight into Hansard. It's on the record. She can walk into any news studio most of the time and say what she wants. There's no actual assault on her views. It's not like what she said doesn't appear. I mean, she's quote tweeting Ricky Gervais, who's got a bad and I think offensive, but again, I don't think if you're offended necessarily that means that someone shouldn't be allowed to speak. It just isn't this crisis as it's being presented. I know I've been Toby's very cleverly set me up because he said everyone who doesn't agree with me says there isn't a crisis and how silly, but there isn't a crisis. You don't have a right to speak wherever you want. Personally, I wouldn't have disinvited her, but I can, but there we go. I mean, it's up to the decision of the people who are holding the event.
I think you're missing the point here, if I may be so bold, and I'm going to throw it out to the viewers and I'm going to come back to you in a couple of minutes, if I may, James. Let me ask you this. Two sides of this argument. Side one is, free speech, everyone can say what they want. The other side of this argument is, that's fine, and as part of being a free society, you get to choose who you hear from. Is it as simple as that, or is there, as I fear, this kind of undertone, this current of kind of suppression of a certain view, in this case, having the audacity to laugh at a joke about a biological woman and what that is and what that there isn't. Is there something a little bit more sinister at play here, other than just, anyone can choose who they want to hear from? Give me your thoughts. When I come back, I'll hear from you and also give James a chance to respond to that as well. I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7. Alongside me, Toby Young and James Schneider. We were just talking about the free speech issue. Claire Fox, Baroness Claire Fox, to be precise, she was invited to speak to a university. Then she retweeted, she had the audacity to retweet a Ricky Gervais jerk. And then there was a little bit of a, I would call it a mini campaign to get her cancelled. And cancelled she was when it came to speaking. Paul says, Michelle, what is the matter with you? You and your channel, you don't even have the courage to even read the joke out. You're supposed to be a free speech channel, and I bet you don't even read this email out. I've got no problem reading this joke. It was a 60-second clip, so I've got to be honest, I don't have time for it all. You can Google it. But the clip, the part that they got offended at is where Ricky Gervais was joking about a woman, and he said, the old-fashioned women, you know, the ones with wombs. And then he referenced the new ones that we've been seeing lately with beards and a C word that I won't say because many of you are having your tea with the kids. So that was what it all kind of goes back to. You're saying, before the break, James, that actually people can be free to choose who they want to hear from and who they don't want to, so therefore pretty much where's the problem?
Yeah, and if she had spoken, people would be free to protest, which is, you know, why if I were in this debating society, I wouldn't have pulled the plug. But if people wanted to protest it, fine. You don't have a right to speak wherever you want. People can invite you, disinvite you, listen to you, not listen to you. That's fine. And it's not like her views are not being expressed by her and by many other people in a whole range of public forums. So it just doesn't feel like this is a type of speech, a thing that people can say that is somehow become unsayable in the public forum. In fact, people have newspaper columns where they say basically the same thing in almost all the newspapers.
In a second, I'm going to yield to the guru of free speech. You know far more about it than me. He runs this Free Speech Union. The problem I've got with this is this is not just a simple case of, hey, look at me exercising my right to choose who comes and talks to my students. This is a coordinated, I would say, set of bullying actions to try and suppress a viewpoint, intimidate a speaker and stop that person from coming. I think it's bullying, I think it's harassment, and I think people need to have the kahunas to stand up to it and say, pack it in. If you were offended by that thing, guess what? Don't come to that lecture or that subject. Move on, right? You, speaker.
You have a right to protest against things as well. Like, you know, if there's a speaker coming to speak that you think is racist or something else, you've got every right to stand outside, shout shame and whatever. That should also be free speech. People should be allowed to say, I find this terrible. This shouldn't be, you know, this shouldn't be part of public debate. But it is.
I mean, how terrible saying that a woman is a biological adult female. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, I wanted to come back on a couple of things James said. You disputed that there is a free speech crisis in Britain's universities. Well, there was a really good survey carried out by the UCU, the largest academic trade union, a very left-wing trade union, which found that 35% of British academics are self-censoring for fear that if they say what they think, they'll get into trouble. To my mind, that suggests a free speech crisis in our universities. You said there's no right to be platformed. Well, maybe that's true, but that's not the same thing as saying people don't have a right not to be no-platformed. I think there's a difference between saying someone has a right to speak their mind under any circumstances on any platform. Clearly they don't. But once someone's been invited, I don't think it's fair to then disinvite them. You say people have a right to invite, a right to disinvite. Yes, they have a right to invite. I'm not sure they have a right to disinvite, and that's not just the Free Speech Union talking. That's also the Equality and Human Rights Commission. It might even be a breach of the law for universities to no platform
you might think it's
after they've invited them.
No, it's impolite to retract an invitation. Do you want to come round for dinner next Tuesday? Oh, sorry, no, you can't come. Do you want to come and debate Toby Young about something at my university student union next week? Then no, sorry, you can't. That might be impolite, but it's hardly an abuse of someone's rights to say, oh, actually, no, you can't. You know, you can't speak here. You can't say this thing, which you can say all over the place, which isn't something that is in any way unsayable, because people are saying it all the time.
It is a breach of free speech. It's contrary to, I think, Royal Holloway University's free speech policy. It may well be contrary to the 1986 No. 2 Education Act and Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. It is a breach of someone's free speech to invite them, and then when a group of student activists object, to disinvite them. But one final point, Michelle. You say celebs can still express this point of view, so what's the big deal? Claire Fox can say it on a number of channels and platforms. But the issue is for people at Royal Holloway, students. They've been sent a very clear message. You can't say this. It's unsayable. It's hate speech. And if you do, you'll get into trouble. You'll be socially ostracised.
I'll get into trouble if I don't say it. That's all I've got time for. Thank you so much. This conversation will rumble on another night.
Hello, I'm Craig Snell and here is your latest forecast on the Metals. Well, as we go through the next few days, it is set to remain unsettled. All of us will see some further spells of rain and it often will be quite windy. So here's the situation as we end Tuesday. Huge area low pressure really dominating the Atlantic. This area of low pressure just towards the west of Ireland will then bring in another spell of wet and windy weather across a lot of the country as we go through the course of the night. So you can see this area of rain gradually working its way eastwards as we go into small hours of Wednesday morning. Turning quite heavy, especially across parts of Cumbria and into Scotland, and accompanied by quite a strong wind. We have got a yellow wind warning in force for Scotland as we go into Wednesday morning. So expect a little bit of disruption here, but note the temperatures, a mild night to come across the country. The rain may well take its time to clear the very far southeast as we go through Wednesday, but for a lot of Wales and into the Midlands, actually a bright start to the day, but further showers working their way in across England and Wales as we go into the afternoon. And really for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a really blustery day here with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Quite large waves as well across western areas, so just do take note of that if you are living near the coast. Into Wednesday evening, really much of the muchness really. Further spells of rain working their way in across the country, again turning quite heavy at times. May well wake up a few people as we go into the small hours of Thursday morning, but with the strength of the wind and the cloud and the rain, again a fairly mild night to come. Could stay in double figures across the far south of the UK. And into Thursday, another band of rain then works its way in across the country. But in between, we will see some spells of sunshine. And where we do see the sunshine, it will still be feeling fairly mild, with temperatures reaching the mid-teens across southern parts of the UK. Then into Friday and Saturday, it's really the same weather really for a lot of the country. But as we end Saturday, it does set to turn colder across the north.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.